This episode of our This Week in XR podcast is sponsored by Zapper. Zapper is one of the world's leading XR companies. Over the past 12 years, they've won numerous awards for memorable campaigns. They've democratized AR by making tools and SDKs that anyone can use. And they created ZapBox, the world's most affordable mixed reality headset. Most recently, Zapper worked with Unilever to create an enhanced QR code called Accessible QR, which enables packaged goods to speak to the blind and partially sighted. If you're thinking XR, give the team at Zapper a call or visit zapper.com to see how they can help you on your XR journey. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Schilowitz and Roni Abovitz for the AI XR podcast. Today is Friday, January 17th. Good morning, guys.
Morning. Still got to get used to saying AIXR instead of This Week in XR.
I know. It's, force of habit, but I did it that time. And I'm also going to say that our guest is Ashley Crowder. Of course, we've talked to Ashley before. She's the founder and CEO of Vntana, and they are a company that manages and creates 3D assets. So we'll look forward to catching up with her. Of course, she is also an Angelino, and I think is actually in the close to the affected area. So we'll get an update from her in a few minutes. Meanwhile, guys, TikTok goes the clock. The Supreme Court has ruled this morning that TikTok, as well as its companion app, CapCut, also owned by ByteDance, will be shut down at midnight on Sunday, unless ByteDance can, I guess, announce a deal with Elon Musk, which, according to Bloomberg, really may happen.
The world just gets nuttier and nuttier by the
That
moment.
seems like a real hardcore move where the government is in cahoots with someone to force a sale. And I don't think this will be without repercussions to the US. Like, we're so dependent on their chips and technology right now that, have we thought this through all the way? There's going to be a hit back.
Well, Trump said
something.
Trump said he talked to Xi, and also that he has a plan for TikTok, which he will implement immediately after the inauguration, whatever that means. And he said, you'll just have to wait and find out what that means. He did say he thought the president has more power than the Supreme Court. So he may be.
Charlie, is this, hey, he's going to buy it and integrate it with X and now have the most powerful media system in the country?
I'm
calling it here. I think that's what's going to happen.
That would be the idea, right? And there are also, tens of thousands, if not million people or more who depend on TikTok for their living on social media. So this is going to have big repercussions if it happens. And
I think he's going to buy it. I don't think they're going to shut it down. I think he's going to buy it. I think X is going to buy it. And that will give him massive leverage over all these other players. And it's going to put the heat on Google and Mark and everything else.
I mean, it's, as I've said, yes, TikTok should be, if not banned, regulated, but all these algorithms should be regulated, and that includes the ones that Meta uses. But that ain't, and the ones that Elon uses. But that ain't never going to happen. Not right now.
But don't you think Mark's also making a bid for it just to be in the game? He's got to be.
I would think so, but I mean, since antitrust is out the window, you betcha.
Huh.
Yeah.
The concentric circles of all this.
Have we entered the, we had the robber baron age at the beginning of the 20th century. Are we like is this the new American oligarch age? Is that kind of where we're entering starting Monday?
Well, that's what Biden said in his farewell speech, and I don't think
seems to be, that seems to be the press mantra on it's pretty obvious to watch what's happening and how it's all sort of transpiring. So it's troubling to me, as I'm sure you guys as well, that we have to talk about this a lot now. Like that.
I know it's really boring compared to tech talk, to be honest. And, at least with tech, we have the illusion of some control and some influence. Whereas, world events, I mean, we're, little ants, and it takes, 100 million of us.
Here's the question. Hasn't the country lived this in some way over the last couple centuries? Like, you had the oil barons, you had the industrialists,
that's because of the way
the defense primes, with
in capitalism, money coagulates. The more money you have, the more money you accumulate. And you let that happen over decades and you get oligarchs.
But here's the question. In a free market, you will have the head, torso, tail. The head are the power oligarchs of the most important sectors at that period of time, and they've always influenced the government. So is this new and people are just now aware of it? Like was it always happening and people were just less aware?
Sort of the Rockefeller effect and the industrial capitalist effect was different in terms of how we all absorb media and how media was a smaller part of our social media and social sort of this kind of social fabric on the internet was a much smaller. Like, I'm remembering when I was a kid, the idea of an oligarchy was something that happened far away in places that had no direct relevance to the American culture, right? The American culture was different. It was supported differently. It was built differently. And now we seem to be moving into this power broker stage.
I mean, but
Of,
Ted, let me ask you this. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, the industrial barons, didn't they like have governors and mayors in their pockets? They would like call the troops in to shoot I mean, they would
Oh,
actually
yeah.
kill union
Yeah.
protesters.
yeah, yeah.
Like, is it just did we lull ourselves into a period where maybe it subsided? But clearly in the 1800s and early 1900s, this was quite prevalent. Well, I'm not saying it was a good thing. It was kind of terrifying that like, these industrial barons could just have the government in their pocket to the point where they can have troops shoot on union protesters.
Sure.
You know
And
that
factory workers, suffering mightily and the conditions of life in the Industrial Revolution for people in major cities were really impossibly difficult, right? And people rose out of it. But there was something about the colloquialism of it, maybe just over time, the story fodder of it becomes a little more romanticized, and maybe it's difficult for us to see we're not in the romantic period of this right now. Everything just feels kind of ugly and nasty, and impossible to absorb. Um,
Well, let me just add this, and then we can move on because the other big tech story this week was Meta shutting down its regulation
yeah,
speech, so that now you really can, if not advocate violence, certainly denigrate other groups and you know propagate things like QAnon, which is specifically what Meta said, and disinformation about vaccines, specifically things Meta said it would no longer censor. It's up to the community to make note of its inaccuracy. Uh, they have AI now, which presumably can search for objectionable content. Facebook is a cesspool, and they have an army of uh, moderators who check content that's been flagged by the system or by other users and remove it or not based on their guidelines. And they had this whole sort of fake powerless board that would address issues before the final decision was made by Meta. So it provided some imperfect air cover, but frankly, the moderation thing has been a nightmare for them. They can't keep up with it. The moderators are traumatized, and they're all contractors who've been terribly treated by whatever subcontractor Meta hired. So content moderation is a disaster. But it goes back to what I was saying. With no regulation, you're not going to have democracy anymore because you don't have a flow of free and commonly understood facts. So these issues are not unrelated. And the way the tech bros have embraced the new administration is kind of shocking. If you listen to Mark Andreessen, who certainly is one of the head oligarchs, if you listen to Mark Andreessen, it's because they were threatening regulation and questioning the headlong dive into AI without considering um, the possibilities of what could go terribly wrong. So now that's over, and of course, Mark believes that anybody trying to impede the development of tech is actually fundamentally anti-democratic because you're allowing bad actors and foreign actors to get a huge advantage over America. That said, you start to worry when a company wraps itself in the flag. And, why do they need to do that? Why do they need to take sides? Right? Because they felt threatened by the other side. They feel threatened by regulation. And now they get the warm embrace of somebody who really can be bought up for not very much money, considering how much their stocks can go up based on their actions or lack thereof.
Charlie, I think it was even more than that. I think they were told there is a free market oligarchy forming. Join it and do and profit.
Yeah,
Don't join it and suffer.
right.
Which
And let's
which
not
team do you
forget
want to
what
be on?
happened. Let's not forget that Trump has threatened numerous times to throw Zuckerberg in jail. And we all know what happened to Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who was an oligarch who would not go along with Putin in Russia. And his private plane was boarded while it was refueling, and he spent 10 years in jail. So, and no one could do anything about it because the political system in Russia gives unprecedented power to the courts, which are controlled by the government. So anybody they decide needs to be in jail can legally be put in jail. And whether things are going to get that bad over here, I don't know. But now that the Supreme Court has ruled the president is unaccountable, Trump could do and will do a lot of things.
But
And he has
Charlie, let me
promised
bring
to
it
do
to
so.
what we do, like in terms of tech, so people know why we're talking about this. I have a belief that AI in particular, but centralized computing reflects the shift in a lack of democracy or a greater amount of democracy. So the shift towards strongman belief in a handful of people and you turn your brain off and just listen to them also is a shift to centrally controlled computing, centrally controlled AIs, which if you run those companies, this is exactly what you want. A bunch of people like numbed out submitting to a handful of companies that continue to grow in market cap and you become their serfs. So it does feed the business plan of many of the hyperscalers.
And remember, of course, if you participate in the stock market in any way, you make the most money by supporting those guys.
Well, you're now a duke or you're
Right,
a minor
exactly.
landowner, right? No, but it's a serfdom. It's like the
That's
aristocracy.
that's what people want. That's the way humans have always lived. And in a way, you can argue what we've experienced in this country, certainly since World War II, has been kind of a golden age. And we're just reverting to mean now that the spoils of war have faded away and other countries can compete with us on almost every level.
Let me
But
ask
he
you
just
guys
had
a
a
let me ask you
go
guys a
on, Ted.
philosophical question. Because as I'm listening to you talk, one of the things that rattles in my head over and over is in the generations we grew up, there was always a tenet that said, if you don't like what's on TV, you can change the channel. If you don't like what you're reading, you don't have to read it. You don't have to engage. You don't have to participate in that. You can participate in something else. Have we now entered a new age where that's becoming a virtual impossibility? So, for me personally, I've sort of left the Facebook platform years ago, and so have many of the people that I communicate with, and just don't have any need to be in that cesspool.
And
I
you're
don't
not on
see any
X
value.
either. And you're not
I,
on X either.
I have it on my phone. I look at it occasionally when somebody like you guys send me a link that's relevant, but I'm not engaging in that platform because that is my sort of last bastion of freedom. I make the choice to engage in the things that feel like they're ethically correct and motivate me in the right way. And I think a lot of people do, and I think a lot of people will be continue to move away from those platforms. I think these really smart tech entrepreneurs know that as well and continue to have to evolve and change their platforms to achieve that. I guess the question is that really the last bastion of freedom that we have is you can choose not to use that tool. You can choose not to engage.
Well, Ted, can I get philosophical for a second on top of your
Yeah,
philosophical for a
that's what,
second?
yeah. Yeah.
I just shot you guys two things. I don't know if we could share them with the viewers or not, but last week my great uncle passed away, almost 99 years old. So I'll be personal for a second, but I'll extrapolate it to this entire discussion. I just sent you guys two things. A letter signed by Harry Truman, personally thanking him for being part of the armed forces that defeated the Axis at the end of World War II.
Mhm.
But I sent you something else which I want to bring to the Smithsonian, which we only saw last week after he passed away.
Mm.
That it's from his commanding officer on the USS Ticonderoga, being in Tokyo Bay, watching the surrender of the Japanese at the end of World War II. the greatest generation. He's like one of the last of the greatest generation who defeated the Nazis, defeated the Axis, actually preserved that idea of freedom and democracy and that golden age that followed it because all these people gave their lives. And with him passing on last week and with what's about to happen on Monday, it kind of felt like we now have that responsibility. Anyone listening has the responsibility. Are you going to squander what millions of people gave their lives for, fighting fascism, fighting autocrats, fighting the kind of thing that some people want to put in place? Or are you going to do what they did and make sure there is a democracy, a light, that the whole world always looked up to? Everyone wants to come here to be free. From all these countries, from Russia, from China, from North Korea, still dream about this ideal of America, and they defeated fascism and they defeated autocracy. So we're letting it creep into our system, but this generation has to do something. The people who are here now, the greatest generation did their job and bought us a few decades. They bought us from 1945 till Monday. Are we
We
going to
we
let that
all,
be
or at
squandered?
least we all, or at least Ted and I are on the edge of being baby boomers. Uh,
I'm the last of the boomers.
Ted's the
I,
last of the
I'm
boomers.
an X. But it doesn't matter what generation you are. If
But
you're
I
alive,
just, my
if you're
point about
alive right
boomers
now.
is Clinton was a boomer, Bush was a boomer, Obama was a boomer. Man, did our generation fuck this up.
Well, the other thing that's philosophically interesting is the fragility of these platforms, right? Like as this was starting to bubble up and people saw that this was heading in this direction, people started to say, "Oh, we'll just build other platforms." And there's, of course, one that's Chinese related, this thing called Red Note that a lot of the kids are sort of migrating across to already. They just see it as a tool, and when that tool starts to sort of fall apart at the edges, they can just move to another tool,
Right.
right?
Okay, I
That's the
brought
fragility
Ashley
of
in so
this
we
thing.
could stop this conversation.
That's good.
Ashley, we went down a rabbit hole that
It sounds like
started
it.
with the TikTok ban and went to
Yeah.
oligarchs and presidential power, all topics we are not qualified to opine on, nor think our listeners are terribly interested in, but it is an emotional topic for us, and we've all been
Yeah.
observers of politics, even if we view it as similar to sports teams. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, the unknown is scary, and
Mhm.
that is the moment. Anyway, speaking of scary, is your family okay and your home okay?
We're okay. We're very lucky. We evacuated Friday and then came back Sunday. So we're very, very lucky. But yeah, I'm
And
sure
How
like you guys,
close was your neighborhood to the fire?
we're on the east side of the 405, like in Sherman Oaks near Mulholland. So
Sure.
like, it was right on the
Yeah,
west.
no, it was on the other side of the 405 and threatening to jump Mulholland.
Yeah, like this,
If the winds had been right, you guys would have been in trouble.
yeah, this was oh, I could share. There's this crazy photo. Friday, the fire was like right there. I was like, we gotta go. We live on a cul-de-sac. We're gonna get stuck here. We're gonna go. So,
Better
but
to be safe than sorry with that for sure.
yeah, but yeah, I'm sure you and you guys are all good.
Yeah, I'm an East Sider, and so I was
Well, I mean, there's another fire over there.
the
So,
Eden Fire, but it stopped at the 2 freeway, which is 4 or 5 miles from here.
well,
But the wind, the wind is so hot to begin with, and then
yeah.
it feels hotter because of the fire. They shut off the power, and like
Hmm.
up on the ridges, in the second row of mountains, you could see the fire.
Yeah.
That wind was blowing. So, the Santa Ana winds, for people who are not in Southern California, which basically is everybody on the podcast, these Santa Ana winds are spooky and hot, and they blow really hard. My grill in my backyard, which weighs 100 pounds, got knocked over. I
Oh
mean,
my
I
God.
could not lift it without somebody helping me. So
Yeah.
that was a strong ass wind. So
That's,
that when that's going on, you feel really weird when you're outside to begin
yeah.
with. And then for a fire to be going on in the middle of that, it's just you have to understand how hot and powerful the wind is while it's happening. So it raises the sense of fear that the fire could be on you
Right. It's
in
very hard
minutes.
to tell. Yeah.
Yeah, terrifying. So, and your
Yeah.
business is okay? Your employees are okay?
Yeah, we're good. There's only two of us in LA now. We're all, COVID, lots of people left LA, all over the place. But yeah, Hike, our head of engineering, he's in Glendale. So luckily,
That's where I am. I'm in Northwest Glendale by Burbank.
yeah, yeah. So luckily he's good.
But we're not on the wrong side of the mountain.
Yeah.
so we should probably back into now we talked current events. Now our listeners are wondering what Ventana is,
Yeah.
and your trajectory and
Wait,
what you've
before
been doing.
I was gonna segue into that with Ashley, but I just wanted to say Ashley and I met in 2017.
Hmm.
I think we were both New Yorkers at the time, and Ventana was more of a marketing company than a technology company. They were using technology, in many clever ways. But then you pivoted, you moved to the left coast, and you kind of transformed your business into something else, which you've been growing for at least 5 years. So yeah, well, we're interested to hear about the quote unquote new Ventana and its role in the ecosystem.
Great. Well, yeah, I actually lived in LA for 20 years now, but I was in New York at least once a month. So I don't think people even knew where I lived. I was all over the place traveling for work. Um, but but yeah, so when we started Ventana 12 years ago, and so 12 years ago, phones couldn't do AR, web didn't support 3D, and so we were doing location-based mixed reality experiences for brands like Lexus, DJI, SpaceX to Adidas. And we built a profitable company doing that, but nobody ever had the right 3D models for game engine and web-based interactive experiences. And so our engineering team was really sick of spending weeks manually optimizing and converting these CAD files to work in game engines and interactive web experiences. So we started writing software to automate the optimization and conversion of these files so we could turn out these events faster. And then in 2019, that was really the turning point because that was the year every web browser started supporting 3D.
Hmm.
And everybody's phone at that point could do some pretty decent augmented reality. And we said, you know what, this software we wrote for ourselves is actually really powerful and it could enable any company to easily and instantly publish 3D across the web and game engines and anywhere they want to go as brands and industrial manufacturers. Everyone's investing more in digital twins and 3D. So we raised a round of funding, launched the beta version of our platform February 2020, which was good timing with COVID because events stopped. And, this was the plan, but COVID expedited the plan. And so we said, okay, we're shutting down our marketing events business and just purely focusing on the SaaS platform. And that's really led us to where we are today. We're a 3D asset management platform that makes it incredibly easy to manage and distribute 3D digital twin simulation models at scale. Started with consumer brands, clients like Michael Kors, Puma, and Kohler. But our fastest growing segment over the past 2 years has been industrial clients. So you can imagine they all design in these heavy AutoCAD programs and they need a better way to collaborate, share that file with any maintenance person on the floor who can quickly pull it up, see what part they need to
Yeah, they
replace.
need these lightweight interactive models and not these heavyweight gigantic CAD files. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Do
Yeah.
you have any competition in the space, or who else is in this realm that is touching this that you have to come up against it from time to time?
Yeah. So on the optimization front, there are like optimization only companies. So
Yeah, there's like Simply
Installed,
Gone that
Simply
some,
Gone got bought by Microsoft,
yeah,
and like per most acquisitions, I think it kind of
kind
gone
of
away.
just got buried in that little ecosystem. Yeah, yeah.
I don't hear about anybody using that anymore, but Instalad has been around for a long time. They're like a for games. So for gaming, they're great. That's really what they're built for. You need to be an engineer to be able to use.
Right. Right.
Rapid Compact is also great. They're also built for engineers. It's like a command line tool. You kind of need to know what you're doing. With Ventana, the big difference, we built ours from the ground up because we were like, this just needs to work. People need to be able to upload 100, 1,000 assets. It all process at the same time, and you instantly need to be able to publish it. So we built intelligence into our algorithms so you can set your desired specifications, and it will get there or as close to there without any visual errors. And that's what's key. Because if you're like, I want this to be 75,000 polygons, but I could get to 76,000 and it looks perfect, that's probably fine. But with
Hmm.
some of the other tools, it gets to 75. There's holes. You got to go back and do a lot of back and forth. And then I'd say the other thing we did differently, we have the actual like asset management components, but everything on our platform is its own component. So we can deploy our optimizer as a Docker container in your cloud, so totally on-prem. You can take our viewer, deploy that as its own container within your platform. So we're just really flexible to like upgrade existing systems or do on-prem or SaaS. There's a lot of options.
And a big thing you mentioned is that it's somewhat flexible to understand the image itself. Is that if it's got a certain poly count, that's a goal set, but it sees that that goal set is causing degradation to the image depending on its use case. Is that a user parameter that you can say I'm flexible to 15-20% of the size of this asset, or no, it has to be this poly count because it's going to be used in, a lightweight mobile environment where I can't have, so I care less about the actual like visual fidelity of certain, nuances. Is that just a user choice, like a slider that you
Yeah, we
compete
have
with?
tons of options. Our default is perfection because that's what we've realized most people want. But yeah, you can force polygon limits, you can force texture sizes. There's tons of options. I mean, you can choose to automate texture baking or not, freeze transforms. I mean, if you are an engineer, you can get in the weeds.
Right.
Most of our clients will say, send us some files, let us test them. Here are your ideal settings, but then play around with
And
it.
what's the business model behind it? How do you make money? How do your clients pay you? How do you collect revenue from that?
Yeah, we're a typical SaaS platform. So it's a yearly or multi-year license, typically based on total users and total storage on the platform. If you are buying our components, it's the same thing, but it's a like our optimization Docker container, which you get on AWS or Google. It's a yearly license up to a certain number of optimizations, and then it's usage based after that.
So the reason they can't do it themselves is because of your optimizing tools?
Yeah, and I mean
I mean,
people.
otherwise they just have a server somewhere with CAD drawings on it.
Yeah, and that's what happens. So a good example, one of our clients, they're huge mining, heavy equipment manufacturer. They design in SolidWorks. Well, they design parts of their system that they sell to somebody building an entire plant. Well, their client designs in Navisworks, and they need to be able to get that file over. So before us, it was taking 2 days per file for an engineer to manually
Wow.
optimize because they wanted to strip out some of the internals. They don't want to share all their IP with their client, and then convert the file to work in this other program. Well, with Ventana, you just can upload all your assets and in a few minutes click share securely, just like you'd share with like OneDrive. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting.
How did you go from the advertising business to finding this niche?
Well, weirdly enough, I'm an industrial engineer by background.
Ah,
And
okay.
my first job out of college, well, I worked at Northrop Grumman for a little bit, and then uh, a BP oil refinery. So I have
Wow.
an
I had
interesting
no idea.
background. Yeah, I was trying to figure out what I want to do. And to be honest, we were doing well in retail, but we were like, there's got to be, fashion and retail is a very small market. It was a great beachhead market for us, but we're like, what should we do next? And we were like, we'll just let the market tell us. So we opened up a free version of our platform 2 years ago, and saw all these CAD and simulation models getting uploaded. And we said, okay, there's something here. And so then we started reaching out. And Aztec Industries, they're another mining client. They were one of our first, and they were like, we can't believe this works. We've never been able to look at these models on our phone. I just texted our CEO, and his mind is blown. He could actually pull up and look at this file on his cell phone. And so I really dove deep with them. I went to the world of concrete with them. I went to the world of asphalt to go learn more and
Wow.
see what they were really getting value out of. And
Wow.
yeah, grew from
And
there.
those events were not boring to you.
No, the world of concrete is the entire Las Vegas Convention Center.
Hmm.
It is massive. Yeah.
Wow.
And then, weirdly enough, at the World of Asphalt, I ran into a friend of mine from middle school I had not seen in 10 years. He also works in the mining industry, so they're a client now. But it's just like you never know who you run
It's
into.
funny you mentioned concrete, and we through our lives journey we pick up different things as we listen and read stuff. And the concrete business is obviously one of the largest businesses at scale in the world, right? Because of what it does. And we kind of forget that it's sand, right? That it's basically the sand of the earth that gets pulled out. And I remember hearing this very bizarre story about, I think it was Shanghai specifically, the rivers in Shanghai. There's a certain grade of sand that works for concrete, and a lot of sand is just got too many imperfections, too much impurities in it. It can't be used to make really good concrete. So there are sides of riverbanks that particularly are good at sand. You must know this, Ashley.
Oh,
And
I'm just starting. I know enough to know that concrete is not asphalt and it's very different, and they'll be offended. But
yeah,
I'm
it's
still
fascinating,
got a
right? But
ways to go.
the story that I remember, this is years ago, so I'll probably misstate some of it, that they continue to dig out this particular river that runs through like, downtown Shanghai, and the banks of the river were becoming unstable because they keep taking more and more sand out of it, and this unexpected consequence of like complete instability in this very dangerous area because they needed so much sand at scale of that particular kind of sand to make concrete. It's just a fascinating
Yeah.
little
Well, it is a
inside.
very dangerous business, right?
Yeah.
Right. When you think about it, and to be honest, when I worked at the oil refinery, I was kind of scared going in there sometimes, because we had accidents. And when we think about XR and its value, some of the best use cases are it's difficult, it's dangerous, and sometimes it's not done very often.
Hmm.
Right? So when you can use 3D or XR and simulation scenarios to kind of train and run through, like that's the perfect use case.
Yeah. Anything you can do remotely with various forms of technology,
Hmm.
drones, remote robots, letting humans control things away from the actual danger zone, obviously, becomes the goal set of many, many industries that are just dangerous by their nature. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ashley, question for you. Are you at all dependent or planning for like sort of scaling of immersive devices, or are you mostly built around let's use phones and laptops for this? Or is there like a whole step up in capability and functionality once there's a tipping point of those kind of devices in the market, like AR, VR sort of devices?
It's a great question. So we have WebXR built in to our viewer. So today you can upload an asset and instantly view it on Quest, Vive, Apple Vision Pro, any of that stuff. Aztec is a really forward-looking company. They have now outfitted their sales team with Quest 3s, and they use them to, I go to the client, put on the Quest, pull up the 3D model from Vntana that's optimized to see exactly where that new tower can go in my plant. They closed a really big deal recently doing that, which is very exciting. So yeah, we can do it today. I'd say it's to your point, like it hasn't like hit that tipping point yet. We're ready for it. But when I talk to a lot of these industrial companies, it's like, okay, well, you know, 95% of our need is 3D model interoperability and viewing on, traditional devices. And then 5% were experimenting and trying to figure out this whole XR thing. But it really depends on the company.
No, that's really interesting that like for where they are today, they're getting it all done with phone and tablet. If you go forward like end of this decade, do you think that's flipped? Or do you think the phone tablet maintains a stranglehold on everybody?
I think it'll be flipped. I mean, all of us here are big proponents of XR. I thought it would happen like 10 years ago, but I think, it's going to depend on the hardware. So the fact that, HoloLens is retired and going to be done, 2027, a lot of the manufacturers I talk to are concerned because that was really the only headset that could meet all their requirements. So if you're planning to wear a headset in an actual manufacturing environment, it needs to be true pass through. They can't risk the battery going dead and your screen going black if you're like literally working on a machine, right? Can't have it tethered to anything. There's just a lot of requirements, and there are not a lot of headsets out there that can meet them all. But it's a huge opportunity for some hardware companies.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, when you talk to Paul Travers at Vuzix, who's been at this since like 2008, the real question is why, when it would obviously benefit a business, do they eschew XR? There are measurability issues, but there's also a lot of friction. It's not that easy to implement. And most businesses are not giant conglomerates that can have a special research department and, come into a manufacturing situation, introduce the technology, socialize I mean, it's hard.
Mhm.
And so, the point that Paul would make is, and also the guys at RealWear have the same problem. The big enterprises, the kind of enterprises actually that you're dealing with, don't want to go through the friction. The benefit does not seem big enough to them to go through the friction of retraining their workforce, even though you and I look at um, their ability to do see what I see, hands-free, how critical that is, especially if you're working from schematics or some other drawing that causes you to look away from the work and look away from your hands, and therefore you make mistakes, and the strain of on your brain is huge, and all these things that, by the way, Microsoft spent tens of millions of dollars investing in these kinds of studies, and it
Mhm.
got them nowhere with their clients. Um, so I don't know about enterprise. I thought enterprise was going to be our panacea, right? I thought even though the consumer thing has been kind of struggling because they thought it was a game machine and it's not.
Mhm.
So I thought, okay, well that's obvious. They got to figure that out. It's a mixed reality. It's going to take longer than we thought, and not because of hardware, which is ironic. And so on the enterprise side, where you can take a low skilled worker in a remote location and by putting a headset on them, turn them into a high skilled worker and they learn on the job. I mean, that just sounds like such a great thing, but that's how it sounds to me as a writer.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound obviously as good to them. And as a result, the enterprise companies are struggling.
Well, and I think it depends, right? So there's certain companies that you've got to have that champion and that innovator who says, "Hey, we have this problem." And when I've talked to one of the lead fellow engineers at Boeing who helped implement this, it started with a problem. The problem was the wiring within like the tanker 627 or
Well,
what, but
they
yeah.
famously use headsets,
Yeah.
right? They
Yeah.
blow
And
up
but it
steel and
started with this problem that was a problem that the CEO was worried about because they were behind on delivery. Because they were behind on delivery, it was going to cost them tons of money, it was going to affect their stock price. And AR ended up helping I think it decreased defects by 80% and increased speed by 20%, and it solved the problem, right?
Yeah,
So
the need outweighs the friction by an order of magnitude, and then therefore
yeah.
there's adoption,
Ashley, you
right?
brought up a good point there. Like, is it really? Because I saw this in my first company where we did robots for surgery, that there was like super clear benefit, and the company that bought us actually took the majority of the market. And it wasn't until they put the other companies in such pain and market loss and stock drop and like to the point of like, my God, the whole thing is burning down. Did anyone react? But is are we is basically it's not that the value prop isn't there, is that most people most in the enterprise don't move until like the house is on fire. Like, do you
They
see
don't
that?
want to be first, they want to be second, right? They don't, most enterprises don't want to make the mistakes and be first because they don't need to be first if no one else is doing it. But the minute their competitor does it, then they've got to do it,
Yeah, it's
right?
a cost
So
benefit challenge where they've got a built-in system. And the other thing is, we talk about this a lot on the podcast. These wearable tools and the trajectory they've taken, will they always be leaning toward the side of exotic, right? Versus kind of the mainstream tool set. And what we learn over week of doing this is these tend to be exotic. We're looking for what will change to make them, there's always this discussion and talk about at some point these visual wearable tools will replace your smartphone, will replace that everyday tool that you hold in your hand because there are certain benefits that you can bring to it once you can bring visuals to your eyes, which you know from an industrial standpoint. But at this point, they live in the exotic lane, right? They don't live in the mainstream lane because there's a more ubiquitous way to solve that problem, except in cases where that benefit is so extreme, to your point about some of your clients, that they will adopt it. And it's
Yeah.
not an adopt just by choice. It's an adopt
And
by extraordinary need.
yeah, and that's why, at Ventana we come in. I think one of the big barriers to all of this has been content. Because you can't you could, without Ventana you couldn't just drop a CAD file into a headset. It would not
Mhm.
work. And so the way we kind of go about this is say, okay, we know you have this 3D interoperability issue. Let's get that solved. Let's get you start using 3D on more displays and places and embedding it within your training, embedding it within your sales, within your maintenance process. And then it's like, oh, and by the way, this also
Yeah, then
works
you
with
look at use
headset.
cases and tool
Have you
sets
tried have
and
you tried putting on a headset and it all works? And they're like, whoa. And it might start out with marketing and sales, but trickle down. So
Mhm.
I don't know. We're trying.
We didn't touch yet, Charlie Roney, on the AI part of your business and
Mm.
the impact of auto creationism and AI assisted or AI driven creation of assets and translators and things like that. Is that starting to
So
come in?
excited. It is helping our business so much. So, where we help people is they have lots of 3D models and they cannot possibly do this manually. They need a way to manage and distribute at scale the different LODs, like levels of detail. So extremely excited about Siemens' announcement at CES. They launched an AI tool to help create 3D models. NVIDIA launched Llama Mesh to help build LLMs to train them better actually on 3D data to do this. Meta's been launching some things. So this is all huge for us because the more 3D models in the world, the more you need a 3D asset management platform, right?
Sure.
Um, 2D content has been around forever, uh, but people still need a PIM system because Amazon wants a PNG file in a certain size, but Walmart wants a JPEG in a certain size, right? So brands have to resize and publish their 2D content with these
Yeah,
digital content.
Adobe's made a healthy living on
Yeah.
translations, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we're really excited. And our team, way smarter than me. We've hired some incredibly talented scientists. They're constantly looking at ways to use AI to help make what we do even better. So,
It's great.
It's funny you mentioned 2022 as sort of a pivotal year for your company, and that also was the year of the metaverse. So that
mhm.
must have also put some wind in your sails at that moment.
Yeah, I think from, 2021 to 2023, because of that, like metaverse, the retail brands were really pushing and starting to adopting 3D, which was new. A lot of the footwear, apparel, consumer good companies started designing through in 3D in-house. So that was big. Um, But yeah, and then it crashed and now it's back. It's spatial computing. It was spatial computing originally, Ronnie, with you with Magic Leaps. And so now I feel like you coined that term is back. So whatever we want to call it, it's all
Very weird world we live in.
yeah.
You must have a lot of automotive clients too, right? Is automotive a big part of your day to day?
We do have some, yeah. Working on who we're allowed to talk about.
So as we hurtle toward the end of our half hour with you, Ashley, I wanted to talk a little bit about women in tech. You mentioned that you had started out as an engineer, which, you must have been the queen of your engineering program. I don't know where you went, but there's like a one woman for every five guys. And because I teach technology topics at Chapman University Film School, I often end up in classes where there's only two or three women. And by the way, those are much worse classes than the classes that are 50-50.
Taylor.
But sometimes, like I just got, you take what the year gives you, semester gives you. So I've got a cinematic AI class with lots of graduate students. It's great. There's 15 people. I really look forward to finding out what they'll be able to do with the technology, but only two of them are women. And so there's a larger question here, which is how do we make this attractive to young women, women in high school who would take seriously the opportunity to enter the engineering field or the computer science field. And I'm a little bit stumped because time goes by, but it doesn't change.
Hmm.
There's a lot of things in place that need to change. I do some I went to USC, which brought me to LA. Did some volunteering. They have a great mentorship program trying to get like women who graduated to mentor women students. And back in 2019 or it was 2019 or 2020, but it was the first year the freshman year class was over 50% women, which was awesome. But what we're seeing, it's not necessarily like high school and college, it's getting into the workforce. They're starting to leave engineering. And one of the problems is leaving engineering, before they graduate, switching majors. So trying to have this mentorship program, I think is really helping at USC. But I mean, for instance, my first job was at Northrop Grumman. I think I was one of two women in the whole building that weren't an admin. And what really pissed me off was sitting in meetings and saying, "Oh, hey, admin," like they just assumed, right? And it wasn't out of malice. It was the assumption because that's the way it had always been, but it made me extremely angry when that happened.
Ashley, let me
And
ask you a question.
yeah,
You're running a startup,
yeah.
CEO. What's that like? So you make it through the big companies, and now you're going to go do your own thing. So are you venture funded or angel? And like, has that experience been reflective of what it was like to get hired as a female engineer? Do you find like people were receptive when you're coming to pitch? And because I have friends who are a lot of friends who are female founders of tech companies, and basically they describe a pretty horrible experience. I wonder what yours was.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person and the experience. I think it's also gotten a lot better over the past 10 years. There's a organization called All Raise that is amazing. That's not only trying to help women raise money, but also help more women become VC partners, right? Because again, it's like both sides. It's like we need more women investing and we need more women getting money and minorities on both sides too. So um and if I ever had a bad meeting, I was like, well, I don't want you to be part of my cap table either, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's the women still are only getting about 2% of venture capital funding. That needs to change, but organizations like Allraise are doing amazing work to help.
It's
Wow.
only 2%. That's like horrifically
That's
bad.
so disappointing.
You're the majority of the globe. And I mean,
Yeah.
like that's completely, I mean, maybe it's a whole nother podcast, Charlie and Ted, but like, yeah, I don't quite understand. It's not for the show, but like how it's so bad, especially on the West Coast that was supposed to be enlightened, supposed to be progressive and thoughtful, and yet it was almost like worse. It was like I have friends and I told them it was worse than like baseball pre-Jackie Robinson. Like baseball broke that barrier in the 50s, where they were not letting, the black folks play. And then and it was like venture capital seems like pre Jackie Robinson for women. And also for anyone who's not a particular kind of person. It's still a very hard process, but it's like feels like 1,000x more difficult, or at least in your case, 50x at least by statistics, than someone.
Yeah, and
Well,
again, I think a lot of it isn't um out of malice and that I mean I think when you go to raise money, a lot of it is who you know. Investors want to invest in people they trust and have known for a while and seen grow a company, do something. Well, who do you know? You tend to know people who look like you and live in your social circles, right? So it ends up being this self-fulfilling prophecy of the people who have the money to give end up giving money that are like them because that's who they know and see really well. So it's this like
That's the way
cycle.
hiring used to work.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like this cycle. We need to like get more women and minorities in the venture capital firms to like expand that network and grow. Because
I mean,
I do think a lot of it is it's not out of malice. It's like out of like this systemic system that's just who
I
you
want
are.
to give you a slightly pessimistic data point from my own experience, but not leaving this session in a dark mode. But
this
a lot of
has been
founders
a
come to
dark
me.
podcast.
No, no,
We
Yeah.
did not do that on purpose. That was not the plan.
really quick, a lot of founders would come to me, including a lot of female founders and friends who are, black or some type of person that would normally not be venture funded. And I have a very high success rate if I refer them to people in the venture world. So, so when I had founders that were not women, not black people, those two cases, it was like a 90% rate of funding
Mm,
across like a pretty decent sample size, sent into a variety of funds. But when I would refer to a female CEO or a black CEO or a majority black company, majority female company run by a female CEO, I'm batting zero. So I'm batting 900 and I'm giving them the same recommendation. I'm saying this person is one of hundreds that, I don't recommend if they're not great. You should fund this thing. And 90% of the time, if they're not that person, it's funded. I almost thought that you need to have a Zoom call where you have a fake persona and you pretend to be some tech bro. And I
yeah.
think the rate would probably go to 90%. So I actually am a little more dark and pessimistic about it because I had my own experience and I would call up and say, why? Oh, they don't have good product market fit yet. But the other company that they gave $100 million to is 5 years away from product market fit. So the answers don't hold, and there is definitely some weird bias that is wrong. But anyway, I
Yeah.
think there has to be a way to solve it. I think you were pointing out some of the solutions, which is you do need a lot more women and others in the actual capital deployment area, which is like, also a huge problem still right now.
Well, Ronnie, you've raised way more money than me, so I think you've got the
No, and it
expertise.
makes me really sad because like I
I
have
know.
friends that are like, okay, I will go to this VC. They're generally good, and it's like, why didn't you do it? And I can't get a straight answer out of them. So I'm not going to name any particular names here, but it is a problem I wish I could single-handedly solve. I don't know how. But there's trillion. I went to a banking conference at the beginning of last week. They said there's $3 trillion of dry powder sitting around ready to be deployed after
Mhm.
Monday because the free market libertarians think it's going to be a free for all.
Yeah.
We should see where we are in 6 months, how much of that went to female-led startups. Because I'm hearing from everyone it's a bull market. That means like you should be able to show up and raise 50 million for your company because a bunch of people wearing sandals and shorts with a half-assed business plan will probably walk away with tons of funding just because the dam is opening. So maybe we should do a special
We'll
show
revisit.
telling that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's revisit. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Ashley, it's great having you on the show again. Good to see you. Congrats on all the success that Ventana is having, and hopefully we've spread the word a little bit. But at least we all learned some more about what your company does. So I appreciate you taking the time. It was a pleasure, gentlemen. Let's do this again next Friday. Thanks for being our guest here on. I think it's episode 225. Wow. We've been getting together on Friday mornings a long time, and so we'll see everybody here, and we'll have some fun on the next show as we always do. Have a great
Yep.
weekend, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Ashley.
having me. Bye.